California's Great America in Santa Clara, California does not have much time left. And that's really too bad because this park has a lot of things going for it. This park is presented nicely, has two really awesome coasters, and also a very interesting history. We'll break it all down in this review, letting you know what it's like to visit this park while it still remains open. And of course, a little bit of discussion towards the end about the future of this park, its ultimate closure, and the future of some of the rides at Great America. To start it off, let's go back to 1976. This is when this park opened on May 20th, and it opened as Marriott's Great America, the star attraction being an aerodynamics looping coaster called Turn of the Century. This coaster was modified a few years later and is now what we know as the Demon. In 1985, the City of Santa Clara Redevelopment Agency purchased the park and recruited Keen's Entertainment Company to manage it. If you're keeping track of ownership changes, that's already two owners. But just a few years later in 1989, Keen's Entertainment Company exercised its option to purchase the business assets of the park, buying the park from the City of Santa Clara. But in 1992, Great America, along with three other legacy Keen's Entertainment parks, became the property of Paramount Communications. They purchased those parks for $400 million. Great America would now be known as Paramount's Great America, and you'd start to see a lot of themes from intellectual properties make their way into the park, like themes from Star Trek or Top Gun. But if you know your theme park history, then you know what's coming, and you know what's coming with the Paramount parks, because in 2006, Cedar Fair purchased all 5 Paramount parks in June for $1.24 billion. This doubled the size of Cedar Fair, and it also gave the company 2 parks in California, the other one being Knott's Berry Farm down in Southern California. At first, Cedar Fair was not very ambitious investing into this park, in particular when you compared it to some of the other former Paramount parks that they'd purchased. They changed their tune a bit though when it was announced that the San Francisco 49ers would be moving from Candlestick Park in San Francisco to build a new stadium in Santa Clara, Levi's Stadium. This would unfortunately cause Great America to close on a few Sundays during the NFL season. But with the amount of people and eyeballs that was going to be coming to this area because of the 49ers moving here, they finally decided to put some investment back into Great America. The main form of that was Gold Striker, the GCI wood coaster that opened in 2013, the first coaster investment from Cedar Fair. The 49ers moving here could have been a factor regardless, but especially it's a factor when their stadium is literally being built across the parking lot. Because they were going to be sharing the same space for parking spots, that is why Great America had to close on game day. And this is kind of sad to say now, but it was looking like Great America was going to have a bright future. A few years later in 2017, the Santa Clara City Council approved the Great America Theme Park 20-year master plan. This would have set up for multiple major additions into this park, including multiple standout roller coasters. As we all know, those plans fell through, and ultimately the whole park now is on the chopping block. In 2022, Legacy Cedar Fair sold the land that Great America sits on to a Bay Area-based real estate developer called Prologis. Cedar Fair, now Six Flags after the merger, is operating this park under a lease. Their lease ends after the 2027 season, with an option to extend it until 2033. As far as we can tell though, the most likely scenario for Great America's future is that after the 2027 season, this park will close forever. And just to be honest, that kind of sucks, because again, Great America has a lot going for it, and it's certainly a better theme park than Six Flags Discovery Kingdom in Vallejo. One thing that impresses about Great America right off the bat is the entry area. I don't think it's a stretch to say that this is one of the better front entrances of any theme park out there. When you enter the park, you have flowers, fountains, and a carousel in front of you, with the Starwood coaster Gold Striker off to your right. This creates a wonderful first impression for Great America, and while this park's skyline is not particularly good, when you drive by you won't see tons of tall rides or tall coasters. It kind of makes up for it when you actually step foot into the park. This entire front section is the nicest part of the park by far. The rest of the park looks pretty nice generally speaking, but this area looks absolutely fantastic. And while Patriot is not a standout attraction, the blue track and white supports fit in really well here in the backdrop. Overall, the arrival experience really gets you excited for your day. One nice thing about Great America is that this park has a very simple layout. There are some offshoots, but basically it's one big midway making a circle around the park. Overall, it's very easy to keep track of where you are and where you're going. One thing that I do appreciate about this park is typically the hours. During the summer on the weekdays, they're usually open 10 to 8 daily. Then, when the heaviest crowds are expected, they're open 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Now, included with your day ticket admission to Great America is access to the South Bay Shores Water Park. The entrance to this is located in the back left section of the park. Because I've not experienced very much of South by Shores, in particular in recent years, this review will mostly be kept to the dry side. I'll come back to South by Shores a little bit later, but overall we're going to stick to the dry side here. The one thing to note though while we're talking about hours is that the water park typically has shorter hours. And of course they're only open during the summer, but typically open 11 to 6. Alright, so let's talk planning your visit to California's Great America. In terms of ticket prices, this park is pretty comparable to your traditional amusement park of this size and scale. Depending on the day, a day ticket can run you as low as about $40 up to $60-ish. Like what feels like every other amusement park in 2025, Great America uses a tiered pricing system. All this really means is that the busier days are going to be more expensive. For example, a summer Saturday in the middle of July is going to be more expensive than a Wednesday in early June. As I allude to, this is the standard operating procedure for most theme parks these days. Another additional cost you're going to find is, of course, parking. Standard parking here is $30. If you have a bus or RV, it'll run you $35, and if you want preferred parking, it'll run you $50. Another nice thing about Great America's parking lot in comparison to, say, Discovery Kingdom's is that it's very close to the front entrance. There's no long walk required here. So once you enter, you're probably going to be looking for some rides to experience. So with that, let's go into the attraction lineup of California's Great America. We gotta start with the roller coasters, and we gotta start with the top two. The best, in my opinion, is the RMC Raptor Railblazer. This was the newest coaster addition to the park, opening in 2018, and while it is a prototype, it's a darn good prototype. The only real complaint here is the ride time. It's over extremely quickly, but everything this coaster has is excellent, and that includes 3 of the most powerful airtime moments on any coaster. The pacing is also phenomenal. You rip through the course. So even though it is short, there is no opportunity to catch your breath, and it is fast-paced and furious from start to finish. This was just to follow up the coaster they already have that's completely out of control, Gold Striker. GCI did such a great job with this coaster's layout. It is non-stop action. Outside of a couple higher turnarounds, Gold Striker generally keeps pretty low to the ground, so you fly through the course. And you certainly feel like you're going way faster than the posted 53.7 miles per hour. The use of tunnels also keeps some of the more filler or transition elements entertaining. Now, the one thing we have to address here is this coaster's roughness. For whatever reason, this coaster gets rough fast. My rides in summer 2025 were noticeably rougher than my rides in winter 2023. On my 2025 rides, I noticed 2 bad jerks in particular that were quite painful, and were not there a year and a half prior. There's a whole host of reasons why this is the case, and ultimately that's not the conversation for this video, but definitely be warned ahead of time. The ride is awesome, it's completely out of control, you should absolutely ride it, but it might beat you up a little bit. The park's 3rd best coaster is their 1993 B&M Invert Flight Deck. Like Railblazer, this is another coaster with a very short ride time, but also like Railblazer, it makes the most of it. Outside of an S-bend before the finale, this coaster is also very fast-paced, focusing on intensity. Between the 2 helixes and 3 inversions, it's possible to gray out on this. And I'm happy to say, Flight Deck is still running pretty dang smooth even after all of these years. This forms a solid top 3 at Great America, but in terms of the rides and the coasters, there is a harsh drop-off to the next best coaster. I guess it's probably Patriot. Like Flight Deck, this was one of the original B&Ms, opening back in 1991. And while I do enjoy the corkscrew, outside of that, it doesn't really do a whole lot. Outside of that one moment, which actually has some force and snap, the ride basically just feels like it's going through the motions. Now it's not horrible, and you should definitely ride it when you're at the park at least once, but it just doesn't do a whole lot in comparison to some of those newer thrill machines in 2025. Good news though is that, like Flight Deck, it's still running pretty smooth. Demon, originally turned into Century, was an opening day attraction for this park. Me and this coaster have a bit of a love-hate relationship, and it's certainly a ride that has its pros and cons. The pros is that this coaster has some cool effects, lights in the tunnels, and a rock structure towards the second half of the ride. Additionally, this coaster does have some power. Those vertical loops in particular can pull some force. But as you might imagine, this coaster is indeed a little bumpy around the edges, in particular in some of those valleys between the vertical loops and entering and exiting the corkscrews. I do appreciate this ride's history, but at this point I think it's nothing more than serviceable. Going down to Midway, we have Great America's older wooden coaster, and that is Grizzly, a ride that opened back in 1986. On paper, this looks like a pretty solid coaster. It's got decent height, length, and speed. It stands 91 feet tall, has a length of 3,250 feet, and a speed of 55 miles an hour. But unfortunately, like Patriot, this coaster just doesn't do a whole lot. There's really no force. I've heard this referred to as a wooden monorail before, and to be honest, that is not too far from the truth. Outside of the valleys on the first two drops, this coaster is pretty smooth for a wooden coaster. There's just no airtime and very little laterals to be found here, an overall disappointing experience. Moving on to the family coasters, we have Psycho Mouse, a rare aerodynamics wild mouse. Even though this is a rare model for the company, I really enjoy Psycho Mouse. It's got pretty solid laterals in the first half of the ride with those unbanked turns, and then in the second half there's some fun dips. Unfortunately no airtime, but still fun. And to be honest, this might just be more fun than the last 3 thrill coasters we talked about. Woodstock Express walks the line between a kiddie coaster and family coaster. This ride is a bit hard to find in the back corner, but it's a great coaster for kids, and it's actually built by Intamin, opening back in 1987. Speaking of kids, if you don't have one, you will not be able to ride Woodstock, so a heads up on that. And the last coaster here is, of course, Lucy's Krabby Cabbies, the E&F Miler Kids Coaster. It's been a long time since I've ridden this, but it's nothing too special. It pretty much just does the job. Moving on to flat rides, California's Great America has a pretty sizable collection. A couple stand out as being particularly noteworthy. The first is Drop Tower, an Intamin drop tower. It's nothing unique for the genre, but like the other drop towers built by Intamin, and really by any company, you get lifted slowly to the top to get a great view of your surroundings and then drop like a rock. Do keep in mind though that, for whatever reason, this is one of the more unreliable rides in the park, so if you see it operating, probably best to give it a go right there. If you're looking for more of a frisbee type ride, they do have Delirium, which is a pretty good option for that. There's also a disco coaster in the back of the park, this being Tiki Twirl, and this is actually one of the larger models with the hump in the middle. Berserker is a very rare and unique Schwarzkopf flat ride. There are not very many of these around. It almost feels like a roller coaster because you're basically set on roller coaster track, but the ride goes in a circle and has decent laterals pushing you towards the left side of your seat. Because this particular ride model doesn't really exist, and this will likely be gone when Great America closes in a few years, definitely make sure to give this classic a go. And lastly, we can't forget about the Carousel Columbia. This double-decker carousel is pretty much better off-ride than it is on-ride, as it's a pretty traditional carousel, but it still provides some neat views from the second level. And there are other flat rides to be sure, these are just some of the more notable ones. One area that Great America shines in is transportation and observation attractions. The Sky Ride, called Eagle's Flight in the back and Delta Flyers in the front, is a great option to get you from the front to the back or the back to the front. Not only is it a quicker method of transportation, but it also provides some great views. And these vantage points are vantage points that you can get from no other spot in Great America, so that's pretty cool. Speaking of which, Star Tower at the front of the park is another great option for views. You are pretty contained to the front right corner of the park in what you can see, but it's awesome to see Gold Striker's layout from up high and so close. The other great thing about both of these rides is that there's no height requirement, so anybody can do it. Then, quasi-tied within this genre is the Antique Cars, Barney Oldfield's Redwood Rally. These antique cars give some cool views of Demon and Grizzly in the back of the park. For dark rides, there is one. Mass Effect New Earth is a 4D flying theater. I think this is actually a pretty underrated ride for the genre, and one of the cool things about it is that they have a live actor in there taking you through the story and acting as your pilot. It gives the story a unique element of interaction, and then there's also some physical effects in there like water. Overall, you pair the actor with the visuals with some of those effects, and you get a pretty solid flying theater. Moving on to water rides, there are a couple of options on the dry side, the first of which is Whitewater Falls. This one does have a double down on the drop, but otherwise it's a pretty standard shoot-to-shoots. And while the splash doesn't look nearly as big as some other models I've seen, still expect to get very wet. If that wasn't enough, you also have Rip-Roaring Rapids on the other side of the park. These will definitely do the job to cool you off on a hot day, but unfortunately this park's best water ride has been removed. Logger's Run was a pretty solid log flume with a double down drop at the end. I have fond memories of riding this when I was younger, and while I understand why they removed it for water park expansion, I still think this is the best water ride here, and so it was definitely too bad to see it go, especially because I always love a good log flume. This made way for more water park expansion, and now they have the entire South Bay Shores water park, which I mentioned earlier. There doesn't look to be a true standout slide in here, but there are a lot of solid options if you want to ride some water slides while you're at the park. One thing to mention though is that on hotter days, the water park quite possibly will be busier than the dry park. I saw this on my July 2025 visit, where everything on the dry park had no more than a 20-minute wait, and things in the water park had a 20 to 25-minute wait from the looks of it. So definitely keep that in mind, and maybe consider going over to the water park very shortly after it opens. Remember, typically it opens an hour after the dry side, so you can get on some of those busier water slides. It's also worth noting that if you want to rent a locker at South Bay Shores, it is going to cost you a little bit. I don't know exactly how much it costs, but from what I can see, it's about $15. One last note, and this is interesting when you look at the tube slides, a lot of them don't have a splashdown pool at the end. I'm not exactly sure why this is done, outside of probably to save money, but it's just kind of an interesting thing to make note of. Now, if all of these aforementioned attractions weren't enough for you, there's also an upcharge attraction in Extreme Skyflyer. This ride is nothing short of an adrenaline rush, there's no doubt about that. But if you want to do it, it's going to cost you about $35 per ride. So with all these rides in mind, how should you tour Great America? Like all parks of substantial size, do your best to arrive no later than opening, and then once you're in, I would recommend going to Railblazer first. This is a popular ride, and because there's only 8 people per train, that line can build up pretty quick. I would then recommend going to the back of the park for Psycho Mouse. We'll talk more about operations here in just a second, but this coaster is operated in such a frustrating manner that if you don't get there early, it's possible you'll never ride it. Because of the low capacity vehicles, this line can build up very fast. While you're in the back of the park, give Grizzly a ride. This coaster in the past often opened about an hour after park opening, but from what I've seen from 2025 trip reports and my own visit, it's now opening with the park, but still keep an eye on that. Now from here, it's up to personal preference where you want to go next. You can either keep making your loop around the park and go towards the front left corner and ride rides like Flight Deck and Mass Effect, or you could come back down the way you just came and ride Patriot, Demon, and Gold Striker. And depending on how long it's taking you to ride Railblazer, Psycho Mouse, and Grizzly, it might be about an hour after park opening, at which time you could hop over to the water park if that's something you desire to do. Alright, let's talk about the elephant in the room though, and that is Gold Striker. A lot of people go here right after park opening, but this is something that I advise against. The reality is that on most days, this is going to have at least a 25 to 30 minute wait, if not much more than that on a busier day, and it pretty much will keep that wait throughout the entirety of the day. So going here first doesn't really make a lot of sense. You're kind of locking yourself into a potentially longer queue line when everything else has a shorter queue line than it's going to be for those rides the rest of the day, if that makes sense. And actually, Gold Striker's line can drop off a little bit after the first couple of hours of the day. So this is part of the reason why I've structured the touring plan the way I have. I think it's best to come back to Gold Striker a little bit later. As I mentioned, let's talk operations for a second. This park was doing a good job in my 2025 visit of running 2 trains on just about every coaster that could. This is certainly a major boost to ride throughput. Now, operation speeds are a little more hit and miss. There's no doubt that I have seen worse operations than Great America, but I've also seen far better, so they fall somewhere in the middle. There are 2 coasters though that can be a bit frustrating from an operations standpoint. The first is Flight Deck. This ride just seems a bit inconsistent in how fast the trains are being sent out. Of course, the one time I actually timed it, it was only a 2-minute dispatch, which is perfectly reasonable, but some of the other dispatch cycles were 5 to 6 minutes. I'm not exactly sure why this is the case. And then, as I mentioned, the worst operated coaster here is by far Psycho Mouse. The ride has small vehicles to begin with, and then for whatever reason, they pretty much only run 1 train on the course at a time. Not only does this make the line move slowly, but it also makes it comedically stack. Sometimes there are 4 trains of people sitting on the brake run waiting to disembark. So yeah, safe to say, a pretty inefficiently operated attraction. This park can still get busy, but I don't think it's quite seeing the crowd levels that it did a few years ago. And interestingly, maybe this further evidences my point, the seasonal events for 2025 have been pushed aside. This means no Halloween event and no Winterfest. From what I was told by some employees at Great America during Winterfest, that week after Christmas and before New Year's is one of their busiest weeks of the year, but they're not going to be operating during that time this year. My experience at Winterfest had a lot of issues, but they did do a really nice job with the lights and creating a Christmas environment. The absence of these events very well might be some of the first steps towards the ultimate closure of this park. And unfortunately, some of these roller coasters do not have a particularly bright future. If you're to run through them, there's only a few that I think could actually get relocated. Railblazer is certainly one of them. I think there's actually a pretty likely chance that this gets relocated. Then you have Gold Striker, which I think could possibly get relocated, but honestly might not because it uses some terrain and it's pretty rough as is. For those wondering, yes, it is possible to relocate a wooden coaster. It's been done before, it's just certainly difficult. All the other thrill coasters though are toast in my opinion. These are all 32 to 50 years old. And even though Flight Deck, for example, is a great ride, between the terrain usage and age, it would not make sense for a park to want to scoop this up. For the family coasters, I don't think Woodstock has a great chance, but Psycho Mouse and Lucy's Krabby Cabbies are definitely candidates to be relocated as well. Then the flat rides and water slides also have a chance of being relocated. I don't know exactly which ones would be more likely to be relocated and which ones wouldn't, but probably the ones that are more reliable or newer have better chances for that. So overall, it's really a bummer that this is the Northern California park that's going to be closed, because it's definitely a better park than Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. And in a lot of ways, it's not particularly close. Discovery Kingdom might have a better overall coaster lineup, but the top two at Great America is better. And it's just so much nicer to be in than Discovery Kingdom. It has a superior atmosphere and feels much more like a theme park. And while Great America doesn't really have theming, there's certainly stylization, and most of it feels very clean and nice. And the hope is that they'll keep it up until this park closes, and it remains nice until that final day. So yes, I do recommend that you visit California's Great America in Santa Clara, California. And not just because it's going to be closing soon, I would have recommended it anyway. There are a couple really good roller coasters here, and that alone makes it worth it. I've kind of seen this park at its best and at its worst. At its best, on a quiet day in the summer, with 2 trains and every coaster open. At its worst, with COVID regulations, half capacity, and 1 train ops. Or Winterfest, with unbelievable crowds. But some of those issues seem to be behind us, and for the moment, Winterfest doesn't even exist anymore at Great America, so you should be able to enjoy your time there, and I hope you do. But with all that being said, what are your thoughts on California's Great America in Santa Clara? Do you think that this is the best theme park in Northern California, and are you sad that this park is going to be going bye-bye very soon? And if you found this video interesting or helpful, I would appreciate it if you considered subscribing down below. With all that being said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.